In this particular webinar, we're going to talk about how to get more from your world cultures cores. And let me just offer the disclaimer once again that we are not saying that Sonlight's core programs are not already complete. They are certainly robust and full and complete as they are written, but sometimes folks like to step outside of the box and add a little bit of extra to their core studies. So that's primarily the purpose of our webinar series on how to get more from your core. I'm Judy Winuk. I'm Sonlight's customer champion, homeschooling mom of 3. For 17 plus years, 2 of those kids have graduated from our homeschool and gone on, and I have just 1 left here at home in high school. I'm joined in the webinar today with my 2 webinar partners, Jill Evely and Kelly Lutman. Ladies, would you please introduce yourselves?
Yes, my name's Jill Evely, and I homeschooled for 17 years before my last kids graduated. I have 5 children, and we enjoyed Sonlight a lot as I was teaching my kids. It just was great education, and so I really love doing these webinars to encourage other folks who are educating their kids with Sonlight and hope that they can get the most out of them and just have a really good experience homeschooling.
And I'm Kelly Lutman. I homeschooled my boys for 19 years before the last of them graduated, so I consider myself a graduated homeschool mom, but continue to enjoy encouraging other homeschoolers in what they're doing, encouraging them in using Sonlight and expanding their horizons and curling up with a great book.
Well, thank you, ladies. Kind of the purpose that we're aiming for here is much like what an artist would do. Artists often start out with a pencil and ink sketch. They kind of sketch out their ideas on canvas, and then they go on to embellish that picture by adding layers of colors and more details. And so that's really what we're hoping to do here, is to help you generate some ideas that might help you to add more and embellish your core studies. Now, in this particular webinar, we're talking about our world culture cores, and just so that we're all on the same page, let me identify which 2 core programs we're primarily going to be discussing in this webinar. The first would be our Core A program for younger students, Introduction to World Cultures, and then our Core F program, which is our Eastern Hemisphere study, which covers a lot of those countries in that 1040 geographic window. So now that we know what we're talking about, ladies, probably the first place that everyone starts when they talk about adding to their homeschooling experience is field trip ideas. Yeah. Now, if we're talking about world cultures in countries like Japan and China and Korea and Australia, for a lot of us, that's going to make it really tough to do a field trip. Not everybody has the financial wherewithal to just board a plane and take a field trip in a foreign country. But there are some options, so field trips aren't entirely out of the question when you're studying world cultures. The first being museum field trips. Museums are full of art and sculptures and examples of those art and sculptures from different countries. So that's certainly one place to start, and if you don't have a museum within driving distance, then you only need to go as far as your computer, and you can actually take some virtual museum field trips. So that's one good field trip idea that you might have for studying world cultures. Another one would be to make a trip to your local zoo, because certainly all the animals that you find in a zoo are not native to the United States. So I don't know about you ladies, but the zoo was someplace we went often.
And it's nice because usually there's little plaques or something on the cages or near the cages that tell what place this is from, how the animal lives, if it's savanna or mountainous, and those type of things. So you can really get a lot of educational value out of it besides just being fun.
Mm-hmm. And it's certainly, if you're doing the Eastern Hemisphere Explorer, which is part of our Core F program, that is full of maps that your students will be filling in, and they can add to their maps the locations that the zoo animals are from, and so that can help to kind of do a little geography study too.
That's a good idea.
Take pictures of the animals and put those in.
Yes, exactly. And of course, food is always an important field trip idea. if you have ethnic restaurants in your area, check them out. Even if you've never had Thai food or Chinese food or whatever, it's a great way to get, no pun intended, a taste for a culture.
Mm-hmm. Especially those buffets are pretty good. Like a lot of, around here they have a lot of different, especially like Chinese or Oriental type of buffets, so it has a lot of variety and it isn't real expensive, especially if you go at lunchtime.
Sure, sure. And sometimes you can even talk with folks who run or work in the restaurant that are native to those countries. And that can certainly add another dimension to your field trip if you have the opportunity to actually speak with someone that was born or grew up in the country that you're studying.
You know, I just thought of this, but when my kids, when we were doing the Eastern Hemisphere, one place that we went a few times was a few different ethnic grocery stores. And there was one that was just run by this charming old man. He was very old. He finally retired. And just to ask him different questions about the different foods and how they fixed it and where he was from, it was really a great field trip.
Mm-hmm. Good ideas. Lots of those in your community, probably if you just hunt around a little bit. Then, of course, hands-on suggestions, and I understand that that can cause a huge sigh from non-creative folks, but hands-on suggestions don't always have to mean building something or sewing something. There are a lot of different ideas for adding a hands-on dimension to your core studies. Our Core F core has an ancient China treasure chest, which is just full of some fun things for the kids to do. I'm trying to remember all of the things that are in that.
Oh, there's calligraphy and there's a game and building stuff. There's all kinds of fun things in there that kids can do themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
And actually, there are treasure chests available for other countries. I know I've seen one for ancient Egypt and ancient Rome, and usually the easiest place to look for those would be on Amazon. But you may find them in other locations as well. If you have local teacher supply store in your area, you might be able to find some there. So those are great hands-on ideas and doesn't require any preparation on your part. Let's see what else. Again, with the food. You know, food is an important part of studying a country. A few years back, Sonlight published a cookbook called Sonlight Cooks, and it is full of a compilation of recipes from many of our Sonlight customers. And you can see there on the screen the item number so that you can check it out on our website. But there are just phenomenal recipes in there from different countries, many of which you will study in your World Culture Core programs. So definitely check it out. And then I'm sure at least most of us are familiar with the Dover coloring books. Well, there are a lot of coloring books that Dover offers that have to do with different cultures. And I've listed just a couple, 3 there on the screen to give you an idea, but coloring is another easy hands-on suggestion and requires very little prep time on our part. So I loved coloring books when my kids were growing up.
They work very well if you have a wiggle worm who you need to have focused when you're reading aloud, but the best way is to keep their hands busy with something, and then their ear can be connected. So I would find coloring books or activity sheets or something for my boys to do that they could do nearby when I'm reading out loud. They could be listening and hearing the information, but they weren't as wiggly, and that helps a lot.
Yeah. And I notice you have holidays around the world as the last one there, and that's one thing that we like to do when we studied the different cultures, is find out just some holiday that they have that we didn't know much about, and to read up on it a little bit and then try something from that holiday, whether it was maybe one of their games or one of their recipes, or maybe it was a certain kind of hat that they wore or something. But to broaden our horizons a little bit and learn about other people's holidays. It tells you a lot about the culture, and it's fun.
Great idea. Great ideas. Well, let's move on to another category, writing projects, at which point all the students are now saying, oh, you've got to be kidding me. But writing doesn't necessarily mean writing a book report. Journaling, is certainly a good way of writing, and perhaps a little more interesting than just a straight-up book report or an essay. Maybe in your world culture studies you've come across a historical character that just really intrigues one of your students. Have them pretend to be that character and write some journal entries based on what they've read about them and what they've learned about them. Newspaper articles was something that I used to use when my kids were younger to teach them writing skills. Perhaps they can pretend to interview an historical character, come up with questions, and then what answers they think that that historical character might provide based on what they've read about them.
Or they could act like they were a journalist writing about an event and kind of in the third person just reporting an event that happened, a historical.
Sure. Absolutely. And I've even seen some ambitious kids put together a little newsletter or a little newspaper full of articles from different events or characters that they interviewed. So really the options are endless here. And we talked a little bit earlier about perhaps connecting with a missions organization or a missionary. Have either of you ladies had any experience with that?
We actually had several missionaries that would once a month speak to a group of us. We got a group of us homeschoolers together, and they would speak to us. They would come, and we had a little room that they would come to, and they would speak to us about their country, about the people. They would bring, oh gosh, costumes and artifacts and money. My one son was really interested in the coins of other countries. Just anything they had, they would bring, and they would give a little overview, and then usually then they would, the moms, we would take turns we would make the person's recipe that they gave us ahead of time so all the kids could try something from that area. And that was really one of our most fun years, just because we learned so much about all the different cultures. We learned about the different people. We learned about the missionary efforts going in, and we pretty much learned about the whole world eats rice. Just about everything that we ate always was some rice base, and that was really made an impression on my kids. They were like, wow, we didn't realize that, so much of the world eats rice. So it was really great and educational.
Yes.
My boys found it fascinating to sit at lunch, perhaps after a missionary visited our church. We would go to lunch with them, and they always enjoyed talking about just what life was like in the foreign country they lived in, and finding out from one missionary that when you heard the childlike music playing outside, we always equate that to the ice cream truck coming down the street in our neighborhood. But their garbage truck played that music because they lived in a place where they couldn't leave the garbage can out because of wild animals and stuff. And so the garbage truck played the music to let people know, bring your garbage can down, here we come. And my boys thought that was just amazing. They thought it would have been very disappointing to live there and think, oh, the ice cream man's coming, and it was very different.
Yeah, I guess.
But that sort of thing we don't equate. We don't understand how things are used differently in different countries. And so we learned a great deal by just sharing with missionaries and asking questions and being genuinely interested.
Yes, very good ideas. And certainly there's the category of geography, and any of Sonlight's world-oriented core programs gives you just an immense opportunity to add geography to your core studies and just kind of open up the world to your children. Maybe you plan to travel to a country via the internet. Like I said earlier, you might not have the funds to be able to actually physically make the trip, but boy, your students could select maybe one of the countries that you're studying, go online to websites like Expedia.com or Travelocity and learn how to look up airfare information. Perhaps they can locate a map for a particular area in a country that they've read about and map out a sightseeing plan. So not only are they broadening their knowledge and their understanding of the country and the culture that they're studying, but they're also gaining some very practical skills. I suspect most children at some point in their lives are going to have to purchase airplane tickets and go somewhere, and so this gives them a little bit of a taste of what that's like and how to utilize a map. You know, as one of you mentioned earlier, we get awfully dependent upon our GPSs, and it would be a shame for our children not to develop some map reading skills. So lots of opportunities to incorporate more geography study.
And even once they get to a particular country, to be able to explore how it would be effective to travel around that country. We tend to presume you're either flying or driving because our trains are not as prominent. But in foreign countries, trains are often a very common way for travel. And so they can explore, trains, buses, different types of public transportation to get into different locations once they reach that country.
Mm-hmm. And have your children create some travel guides. Maybe they have read about a location that they just someday dream about actually visiting. And so help them to put together a nice-looking brochure that they might give to someone else that they'd like to have go with them. Perhaps they learn about an area in Japan or in Korea, and they can help people understand how to best dress to visit that location, what attractions they must see while they're there, what facilities are available, maybe hotels in the area, transportation like you just mentioned, Kelly, how would they get from one location to another? So again, it kind of broadens their knowledge and understanding of a particular geographic location, but it gives them a chance to be creative and to develop some art skills and some layout skills for creating a brochure. So again, lots of ideas that will have multiple effects in teaching some very practical skills to students. And then finally, just some fun extra ideas that didn't really fit in any particular category that we've already covered, but were certainly worth mentioning. Movie versions of books. Many of the books that are included in Sonlight Core programs also have movie versions. And I think the three of us would highly encourage you to always read the book first.
Yes.
Yes.
But then go see the movie, and it just generates a whole lot of discussion, an opportunity to compare what was in the book that wasn't in the movie. Kelly, I know you mentioned earlier in one of our other webinars that you were just sharing with your boys some of the things that were in a book that couldn't be in a movie.
Right. When we saw, the first time we thought, oh boy, we found the movie, and we'd read the book already, and my boys were very disappointed in the outcome of the movie because it was so very different. But when I was able to point out much of the book was about this main character's thought process, and much of it was presented from an internal perspective that could not be presented or portrayed on a movie very effectively. And so we started to talk about the differences and how film creators would try to portray the thought process or the growth of the character, and what the shortcomings are. Why print and why written books are so much more effective in many areas.
Sure.
And even though sometimes we felt that the movies were really lacking, if I may put it that way, compared to the books, and weren't near as good and didn't give you as rich of a picture, they also had a lot of positive things because you could actually see the geographic area of what it looked like, and you got a better idea for what the people wear and for the weather. And a lot of those things that you don't get as intense of a feeling for a lot of times in a book, you could get those through a movie. So between the two things together, a lot of times it makes a pretty nice picture. It gives you a more full understanding of it.
Yeah, very nice resource. Perhaps you help your children to put together a presentation about a country that you're studying or a culture that you're studying that they can share with friends or grandparents or other relatives. And really that helps to provide a couple of beneficial side effects. One is that it gives your children the experience of public speaking, but on a smaller, perhaps less stressful scale. It gives them the opportunity to kind of collect their thoughts and be able to share with an audience, which is a very important tool for students to have. And I think it also does something else. Many times we know that well-meaning neighbors or relatives may have some doubts about the effectiveness of homeschooling. and very often a little show and tell or presentation
Right.
From a student on what they've learned goes a long way towards just representing how effective homeschooling can be.
Mm-hmm.
And then certainly the Sonlight forums are just full of supplemental materials, books, hands-on activities, movies, recipes. Definitely check the forums and see what other Sonlight customers have to say who are using the world culture cores that we offer. And you can visit the forums at forums.sonlight.com. So just a great place to go and see what other people are doing with the same materials that you're studying. So ladies, we hopefully have provided some just basic suggestions and ideas for maybe stepping outside of the box of your instructor's guide a little bit. Jill, why don't you share your disclaimer one last time?
My disclaimer is, please don't feel like you have to do more than what's in your core. We're just trying to give you some ideas if you would like to, and hopefully it'll spark maybe an idea or two, and you can try a couple things that might make your school year just a little bit better or more fun that would work for your family. But if not, don't do anything because we've said it. This is just some ideas to just help you along. No guilt if you don't do anything.
No guilt. No, we don't do guilt here.
No, guilt-free.
Yes, guilt-free ideas. And it could be that you will never do any of what we've suggested in this brief webinar, but perhaps it has helped to spark some ideas of your own
Yes.
That might work better with your family. So certainly whatever works well for you.
Right.
Ladies, thank you once again for taking the time to work together on this project. It's been a pleasure as always.
Well, thanks, Judy. It's been fun.
We always enjoy working together and encouraging others.